an American, but presumably not if I wasn't, but gave him a nod and a welcoming smile, and he brought his drink over, introduced himself with Teutonic formality, and sat down. I was ready for some sympathy and suggestions, and Herr Reichmann didn't have to pull out my fingernails to get me to talk about my quest for a man named Charles Atherley, though of course not a syllable of the word Antichrist passed my lips. I had long since invented a cover story to explain my interest. I am a freelance writer, investigating a man said to be leading a new religious movement. A new religious movement? Herr Reichmann was amused and faintly contemptuous. You know, he said, we Europeans are not so gullible as you Americans with your angels and your magic crystals. Exactly so, I replied. That's just why Atherley seems so significant. We made polite small talk for a few minutes. Then Reichmann paused and gazed thoughtfully into a distant corner of the room. I can put you in the way of someone far more significant than this Atherley, he said, and possibly a member of his circle will be able to advise you. I'd be most grateful for that. He wrote down a name on a beer coaster and handed it to me, saying, Der Bau, 9 this evening. The concierge will be able to give you directions. The concierge was indeed able to give me directions, and I asked him what a bow is. Bow is a tunnel, he said. No, I'm mistaken. Bow is like an underground hiding place. A catacomb? No, an animal's hiding place. A burrow? That's it, yeah, a burrow. Der Bau turned out to be a cabaret along classic lines, a boozy laboratory of artistic and intellectual experiment, rather than a venue for popular entertainment. It was accessible from the street by means of a winding staircase that seemed to descend into the bowels of the earth. The room itself was, of course, abysmally dark, but thankfully without the usual bohemian touch of candlelit tables. A low circular stage revolved slowly in the center of the room under a stationary four-sided marquee of video screens. In the center of the stage stood a sort of combined lectern and computer keyboard. I groped my way forward till I found a seat at a table not much bigger than my notebook. One of my keys to early success as a scholar was the ability to listen to a lecture while taking it down verbatim in shorthand. Having made my preparations, however, it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't even know the speaker's name, for God's sake. These thoughts were cut short when the lights under the marquee brightened, marking the arrival of the man himself, the arrival of a man and a woman, as it turned out. They stepped onto the stage, and the man took his place at the lectern and turned on the keyboard. As he worked at the board with silent concentration, oblivious of the audience, he reminded me of a large bird of prey, with his black suit, piercing eyes, and beaky nose. He also reminded me of a gargoyle, with his broad cheekbones and wide mouth, and of a lanky Parisian gangster I'd once met at a cocktail party, who quoted Augustine and Schopenhauer and bore in his face the shadows of a terrible past. I thought he looked to be in his early or middle 40s. The woman, tall, athletically built, in her early 30s, took a position at the opposite side of the stage, facing the audience. Wearing jeans tucked into boots, a black silk shirt, and a tawny rawhide jacket that matched the color of her hair pulled back into a ponytail, she looked out solemnly over the crowd. As the revolving stage slowly brought her round to my side of the room, I saw she had an extraordinary tattoo across her face. A red butterfly. From her rich complexion and exotic features, I felt sure some parent or grandparent had given her an infusion of Africa, Asia, or pre-Columbian America. Suddenly the video screens popped into life, bearing a title, The Great Forgetting. The man gave the audience a moment to look at it, then began to speak. I felt the woman's eyes on mine as she, too, began to speak. Inside, Almost from the first words out of his mouth, I knew I'd been deceived, mysteriously and gratuitously. This could be no one but Charles Atherley. That he was an American was beyond doubt. That was enough. It wasn't possible that two different speakers from America could be spreading inflammatory ideas around Central Europe at the same time. Luckily, my training didn't fail me. Even if my brain was stalled, my hand continued to work. Atherley's words marched across the page as if awakened by magic, as if they'd been written in invisible ink and were being drawn up out of the paper by the action of my pen. I realized I was watching my hand when it suddenly stopped, because Atherley had stopped. I looked up to see a new set of words forming on the screen. Verily I say unto you, again and again and again. For some reason, this succeeded in jolting me out of my trance. I'd missed the first 4 or 5 minutes of Atherley's talk. But of course I hadn't missed them entirely. The minutes were there as a sort of echo that I was able to play back for the gist of his message. Atherley was talking about matters close to my life and even closer to my work. And I didn't like what I heard. This wasn't because it wasn't true, but for exactly the opposite reason, because it was true, and I'd missed it. He was making acute observations about phenomena I'd witnessed 1,000 times and never thought to notice. Everything Atherley was saying was obvious, and all of it was new. This made it maddening, because what is obvious should be old, and therefore well-known, boring, and unnecessary to say. I glanced at the listeners around me, and seeing them riveted by Atherley's words, I wanted to kick them in the shins, grab them by the hair, and shake them, screaming, "Why are you paying attention to this? You know this! You could have worked it out yourself!" But they hadn't worked it out. And I hadn't worked it out either. The stage revolved, bringing me first Atherley, then the woman speaking with her hands. It got so that I hated seeing them coming and going, the two of them somehow being worse than twice as bad as one of them alone. I hated seeing them coming and going, but I also just hated them for what they were doing. They had found a sore spot in me that I didn't even know I had, and I detested them for it. They went on for another 40 minutes or so. I heard it all, and I closed my ears to every bit of it, though my hand went on taking it down. And then suddenly the screens went dark, the lights on the stage dimmed, and Atherley and his pal stepped off into the darkness. I got out of there like a drunk who has just remembered where he stashed a bottle. In fact, I needed a drink, but I didn't want one there or at my hotel where I might conceivably run into Herr Eichmann again. No problem. Munich is a big, big city with plenty of drinks in it. Friday, May 17, Munich. It occurs to me that quite probably I've screwed up, though I don't suppose I've screwed up irrevocably. I came, I saw, I ran away. I'm obviously not going to make a point of reporting this to Father Lulfra. It's also obvious that I have to get back on Atherley's trail. Herr Reichmann isn't registered at the hotel, and the barman who introduced us says he's never seen him before. I didn't really expect it to be that easy. The concierge looked up Der Bau and learned that it opens at 3 in the afternoon, information that proved to be false or outdated. It opened, rather reluctantly it seemed to me, at around 5:30. The staff on hand for this event didn't have enough English to be of any help, but they managed to make it clear that they would send me someone named Harry if I'd sit down and wait for an hour or so. I sat down and waited for an hour or so, and surprisingly enough, they sent me someone named Harry, who turned out to be an Englishman, or maybe a German who had schooled in England. I told him I was trying to find Charles Atherley. "The name isn't familiar to me, I'm afraid." "The man who spoke here last night." "Ah, is that his name?" "You don't know his name?" "I don't know that one." "What do you mean?" The name I know may not be a name at all. He's known as B." "B? B as in boy?" "That's right." "Why does he call himself that?"